Welcome to the Introduction to Macros tutorial. In this tutorial we will cover where the macros are saved, what the various fields mean in the edit window, what is considered text and code in a macro, formatting options, the difference between properties and variables, and how to define token properties. So, where are your macros saved? MapTool gives you three options. The global window, which saves macros in your computer. That campaign window, only the game master can add macros to this window, and they are saved in the campaign file. The selected and impersonate windows, which save the macros in the selected or impersonated tokens. You create a macro button by right-clicking in the macro window and choosing Add New Macro. Then open the edit window by right-clicking on the macro button and selecting Edit. The auto execute box needs to be checked, otherwise the macro will just print in the chat window. The apply to selected tokens box needs to be checked if you are using macros in the global or campaign windows. Otherwise the results of your macros will not be applied to any particular token, like changing hit points. Now for the contents of your macro. The biggest rule you need to know is what is considered text and what is considered code. Anything outside of the squared brackets is considered text and will just be printed in the chat window. If you want text to be printed to the chat window from inside the square brackets, just surround it with quotes. So using these rules, here's an axe attack macro that I wrote using two different ways to display text. You have text that will print out just as it is typed, and you have code that is rolling dice and adding. Then in the third line I combine both text and code inside the square brackets, and it does need the plus sign to connect the quotes with the code part. Also note the formatting options I used. The H followed by the colon is 1. That hides the result of whatever calculations you are doing in the brackets. See in this bracket how I combine two formats by using a comma. This will print out just the result and only to the GM. For a full list of options, go to the MapTool documentation link on the tutorial website. This is the wiki. Scroll down to Role Formatting Options and Role Visibility Options. Back to the macro. Note the BR tag. This is the only way to insert a line break. Putting things on different lines in the macro doesn't do it. And it has to be in a spot for text, not code. For those of you who know HTML, you will recognize that tag. And yes, MapTool does support some HTML, but that is for a different tutorial. The next thing to understand is the difference between variables and properties. A variable is letters or a combination of letters and numbers put into macro as a code. Think of it as a container that you can fill with a value. When the macro is finished, the variable disappears. A property is like a variable, but is defined inside of the token. So if a property is assigned a value, that value is remembered in the token and then can be retrieved with other macros. Here's an example of an apply damage macro. The first line is the math, and so I hit it with the H format. The last line prints the results with the R format. In the first line we take hit points, which is a property stored in the token, and subtract damage taken. Damage taken is a variable that is not defined. So a window will pop up asking for it. Then hit points is assigned the new value. The second line prints the new hit point total. Notice how the plus sign links together the text and code. One final thing I should cover is how you get properties in your tokens. Go to the Edit menu and select Campaign Properties. You will see 6 tabs. You can hit the Export button to export a Campaign Properties file that contains the settings contained in all 6 tabs. And then you can import these campaign properties into any campaign file you have running. In this tutorial we will only be covering the first tab, however, Token Properties. In the Token Properties there is a field to name a new set of properties and a list of any current property sets. In the middle you will see the text field. This is where you can type your token properties. Each property goes on a different line. How to get the properties to show up in the stat sheet or have a default value is explained at the bottom of the page. Whenever you make changes to a set of properties, you must click the Update button and then the OK button. If you do not do all of that, your changes will be lost. In this tutorial, we covered different types of macros and where they are saved. We covered how to create a macro button and a couple of key settings in a button. Then we showed the basic rules for writing a macro and the difference between a variable and a property. Finally, we showed how to create your own properties in your tokens. These skills should be able to get you started making basic macros that can speed up many aspects of your games. Future tutorials will cover more in-depth aspects of the macros.